Hello and welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday, the college football daily fantasy show. I'm your host, Alfred, and we have got our Week 10 slate lined up here. The DraftKings main event is 14 games, and we have some Pac-10 action going on this weekend with Arizona State at USC, and we have Arizona at Utah. I'm really excited to see some of these Pac-10 guys get in action. Very happy that league is going to play. We also have West Virginia at Texas, North Carolina at Duke, Michigan at Indiana, Michigan State at Iowa, Florida at Georgia, big rivalry game there. Kansas at Oklahoma, Texas Tech at TCU, Minnesota at Illinois, Maryland at Penn State, Houston at Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State at Kansas State. And then, of course, the weekly COVID delay or postpone is Purdue at Wisconsin that won't be played. So those are our games. And, what I like to do is I line up, of course, point totals and expected totals. And then what I really like to do is look at the defenses and what they're giving up in order to identify offenses we may want to invest in and stack. First thing I'm going to do is I'll just go over the top point totals on the slate. Number one would be Oklahoma playing Kansas. They're slated to score about 50 points based on the Vegas win point totals. Penn State versus Maryland, they're slated to score about 45. Those are the top two by a long shot. Then we have UNC at 37, TCU at 35, which might be a little bit of a sneaky high total for Texas Christian. To round out the top half or so of the teams, Minnesota 34 projected points at Illinois, USC 33, Texas 31, Michigan 29, Oklahoma State 29, and UGA 28 playing Florida. So let's just get right into the players. That's what I think everyone comes here for. We want to know, who are we going to play? So the top player on the list is Sam Ehlinger. 9,300. He probably won't be on my list. West Virginia is a really difficult matchup, and they have been all year. They are just a defense that allows just very little volume. They have the third fewest passing attempts allowed on the slate. They have the fifth fewest rushing attempts allowed, and both of them on a per play basis are very low. They have one of the lowest yards per play allowed, actually the lowest yards per play allowed on the slate at only 4.2. They're just a difficult defense. I think they play a nasty style, and I would not want to pay the most expensive number for a guy going up against that matchup. Then we have Spencer Rattler at 9,100. I'm not really excited about playing teams against Kansas, at least playing quarterbacks, because I think what happens in these games, they get so out of hand. You don't need to really force the issue through the air. I think we will look at some running backs in this game against Kansas, but I don't think I want to pay the second most expensive price for a guy who may not play the third quarter, or may not play the fourth quarter, and just may not need him through the air very much. If I'm going to play a quarterback in a total blowout like that, I'd probably rather play the next guy on the list, Sean Clifford for Penn State, because this is a guy who's pretty much the whole engine of the offense. I mean, he gets tons of rushing carries in yards, as well as passing volume for the offense. So I just don't want a team that's going to split up running and passing. If there's a quarterback who is the whole engine, I don't care about a blowout. If it's going to be a huge blowout, it's hard for me to pay a premium for the quarterback. Although, like Trevor Lawrence did recently, had 4 touchdowns in the first half and pretty much paid for himself. But I think that's kind of a risky bet to make. Of Sean Clifford, I actually do like him quite a bit against Maryland. This will be a theme, Penn State against Maryland. They're coming off a loss where they looked pretty weak against Ohio State. They are at home. They get Maryland, who is one of the worst defenses on this slate. Granted, we only have a 2-game sample size. Maryland is the 4th highest yards per attempt allowed. They are the most rush attempts allowed on the slate, and they are 2nd most rushing yards per attempt allowed. So this defense is really, really just getting absolutely destroyed in all facets of the game. They have a decent enough offense, I think, to kind of keep pace so that it will be a blowout, I think, by the end of it all. But I don't think this is a game, for instance, the Kansas game, Kansas just doesn't have an offense to even put up some points, to even keep it remotely close. I think Maryland may, although Penn State's defense is pretty good, but I'd rather roster players in this game for the Nittany Lions. And it begins with Sean Clifford. He is a high-priced guy at 8,900, but I like him, and we'll have some lineups with him. Next is Desmond Ridder. He's 8,700 for Cincinnati. I like the matchup once again. Last week he was really nice, a nice play against Memphis, and Houston is another team that you can take some advantage of. They actually haven't given up a lot of volume through the air. They're only 27, I believe, pass attempts allowed in their games, but third highest yards per attempt. So when you attempt passes, you're doing pretty good against this secondary. And they give up a ton of rushing volume. So third highest rushing attempts allowed per game, even though the yards per attempt on the ground is not super impressive for our purposes. In general, though, this profile is a pretty weak defense. And I like the fact that they're allowing efficiency through the air, yards per attempt. So Ridder may not have to throw 50 times, but he also runs, and they give up a lot of running. And, the backfield's a little split. So Dokes and Jerome Ford kind of share, but Ridder is kind of their main guy. This is another one where the offense runs completely through the quarterback. And I don't mind Ridder at 8,700. I think I'll probably have a little of that too. Now I get to my favorite quarterback, Keaton Slovis. You'll see in my Twitter bio, Keaton Slovis, QB1. I love this kid. He was awesome as a freshman last year. He comes in at 7,800, but this is a guy who in his last 6 games as an 18-year-old true freshman last year went over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in 4 of his last 6 games. One of them was 500 yards. And, this offense is going to want to throw. They don't have really established running back. I mean, they have all the weapons on the outside. They've got we'll touch on multiple of their wide receivers, but, one of which is a potential first-round pick, but maybe second. Still, high-caliber NFL prospect. I think 300 yards with this guy is very likely. For 7,800, that's a really nice thing to be able to bank on. But obviously, looking at his stats from last year, 400 plus is not out of the question. I just think this offense is going to want to throw. I think he's depressed on price a little bit because we haven't seen him yet this year. But I think the talent here is absolutely ridiculous. He pretty much broke the CPOE record, I'm pretty sure, for a true freshman, which is completion percentage over expected. So incredibly accurate. When you watch him in the pocket, he's just a magician. Not necessarily a running threat, but incredibly aware and mobile in the pocket. He's awesome. I will definitely have a lot of Slovis this week. I think this is a guy who could easily be pushing 9,000 by the end of the year. I think he's going to be a Heisman candidate. That's pretty much my stance on Slovis. And we have Tanner Morgan. He's 7,300, which is a pretty nice price considering this Minnesota team has the 5th highest total on the slate. I like the matchup with Illinois, really from all facets. I mean, running, passing, quarterback, everybody against Illinois should be totally fine. But the value here is pretty nice at 7,300. And this is a little anecdotal. I don't have any data to back it up. But the Minnesota passing offense has been pretty clunky this year. They have a potential first-round draft pick, Rashad Bateman, we'll talk about. But, they've been lighting it up through the air over the last 3 or 4 years. And all of a sudden this year, they don't look that good. They've done a lot of stuff through the ground. I think this could be a get-right spot for Morgan and Illinois against Illinois. And I would be very willing to kind of put my bet down that PJ Fleck and this team decides to open up the passing game and really try to get right against Illinois. So I think it could be catching fire here at a pretty good price tag. Then we're going to drop down to Max Duggan at 6,400, which is an excellent price for this guy. given the matchup, he's unlikely bonus. I'm not sure if he'll hit 300 or 100 on the ground. He does have rushing upside, but I'm not sure he's a 100 yards kind of guy. I mean, few quarterbacks are. But TCU has the fourth highest team total on the slate at 35 points. That's about 5 touchdowns. And he has the most rushing attempts and rushing touchdowns on his own team. Additionally, he's the quarterback, obviously, so he's going to get passing work. You know, like I think he's kind of a cheaper pivot off Sean Clifford. I mean, the matchup is great. Fourth highest team total on the slate. 6,400, and he's the offense. I mean, the whole offense runs through him. They don't have an established running back. They do have some nice receivers, and I think this could be kind of a spike week for Max Duggan. Really nice price at 6,400. I'm going to be very much in on Duggan, probably pairing him with a receiver we'll talk about in a minute. And then we have Jarrett, I think it's Doege from West Virginia. And he is 6,100, but this is a guy who has had 3 straight 300-yard performances. That doesn't mean he's going to do it this week, but certainly in the range of outcomes for him. And I like the matchup against Texas. Texas allows a whole lot of passing volume. That's because teams, I think, really can't run too successfully on them. And also because of the Texas offense, teams can't just kind of like coast against them. This is allowing the most passing attempts of anyone of any defense on the slate. Kind of not a great yards per attempt. So it's not like it's going to be a complete bonanza, but I'll take the volume at 6,100 in a guy who in Doege, who has certainly gotten to 300 yards already. And this should be a pass-heavy approach against Texas, and likely will need to keep the pedal to the metal against them. So I like that a lot. We have a super cheap quarterback, Corin Taylor, 4,500 from Illinois. This is a third-year player, dual threat type quarterback. He came in off the bench against Purdue and had 17 rushing attempts, only I think about 34 yards, but 273, 2 and 2 through the air. I think he had some fumbles as well. I mean, this guy is very raw, but for 4,500, I'm going to take a guy who'll give me the Konami code, 10 to 15 rushes. He put up 273 through the air. I mean, this guy was not like, completely playing super conservative. So I think, for 4,500, if he's announced the starter against this Minnesota defense, very interested in some Corin Taylor for 4,500. Opens up a ton that we can do, which you might need it because there is a very expensive running back on this slate. Mohamed Ibrahim is $10,000. And we'll touch base with him in a minute. But just to go back to Taylor, this quarterback from Illinois, the Minnesota defense is the worst defense on the slate on a yards per play basis. They have been getting eviscerated through the air, on the ground. They are giving up 9.5 yards per play on the season. The next closest team is giving up 6. They're giving up 10.3 yards per passing attempt. They're giving up 8.6 rushing attempts on the ground. I mean, it's a disaster for Minnesota on defense. I think they could get right against Illinois. I don't think this defense should really be that bad, but my goodness, for 4,500, take a quarterback against that defense. Anything could happen. I'm definitely going to do that in some tournaments. No question about it. You always run the risk. There was a quarterback on Maction Wednesday that I thought could be kind of interesting, and he was absolutely atrocious. So when you get real down into these price ranges, certainly know the risk you're taking. But if he's announced the starter, you've got some Konami code there, you're going up against a horrible defense, I would be interested. All right, back to Mohamed Ibrahim. This guy is $10,000 for DraftKings salary. He's had 67 carries in 2 weeks. That's some insane volume. That's Jonathan Taylor level stuff there. And certainly has produced 4 touchdowns last week. He is cost prohibitive, though, with that price tag. So, if you're going to do Ibrahim, you're going to have to really cut corners elsewhere. I don't think you can argue the volume here, but also I think we can find someone who'll produce similarly, or at least have a similar expected range of outcomes and save a lot of money from $10,000. One of those guys is Javonte Williams. He's 8,500 and certainly can go 3 touchdowns deep in a game, has done that at least once already. Duke gives up a lot of rushing volume, but in general, Duke's defense is pretty stingy. Yards per attempt, both through the air and on the ground, is actually decent. So teams are running on them a lot, probably because they're beating them. I mean, Duke's not a very good team. I wouldn't have a problem going Javonte Williams, but again, I think we can find some guys a little bit lower that have the same ceiling, and we're saving a little cash. Which brings me to Chuba Hubbard. He's 7,800. And this is a guy who's going to get the surest volume outside of Mohamed Ibrahim on the slate. He's not had less than 22 touches in any one game this year. Yes, he has not been his usual explosive self, averaging only 4-point-something yards per carry, which is about 2 yards less than his career average. He still can take it to the house. He still can go for a 75-yarder at any time or multiple. And the matchup this week, Kansas State, whose defense is, kind of just middling all around. They're not awful, but they're not necessarily imposing either. And I will take the volume, the fact that he's absolutely their feature running back, no question about it, against a middling defense all day long. You're not paying a premium at only 7,800. I would feel very comfortable with him as kind of my RB1 in a lot of lineups. And I think I'm going to have a lot of Chuba Hubbard because I do think 200 yards is in his range of outcomes any given week. And you're just not paying for that premium. He's a real nice tournament play. I think he's a good cash play too. I mean, he had 3 straight 100-yard games in a row before this last little bit of a dud. I don't care if he does it on 50 carries or not. I just need to get to 100 yards. And I think he's one of the better bets on the slate. Then we have Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma. In his first game back off suspension, he went for 3 touchdowns in the first half and now gets the worst run defense maybe in the world, which is the Kansas State Jayhawks. On a per play basis, they're actually not so bad. 5.2 yards per carry is definitely not good, but there are some worse run defense like Maryland on the slate, and of course Minnesota. But certainly a very weak run defense. Breece Hall went to town on them. The problem with the Oklahoma backfield is there's now a 3-headed monster. I mean, you've got Stevenson, he's back, he looked great. Pledger has looked great and had 20-plus carries in 2 different games, and then Seth McGowan, their freshman, has looked really good too. So I think it's going to be divided up. Stevenson seems to be the guy they like the best. He only had 13 carries though last week. And I think this is better tournament play. I don't think these guys are safe enough for any kind of cash game. But in a tournament, any of them are liable, honestly, for multiple touchdowns, or maybe even Stevenson and Pledger get in the zone twice. That wouldn't even shock me. I mean, Oklahoma's going to be able to run all day on Kansas. They're going to be able to run all second half. It's just a disaster for Kansas. So I like any of them in a tournament. I don't think you can count on any one of them. I'm not confident saying who will necessarily be the lead. I think it's going to be Stevenson or Pledger, but either one of them could see 15 to 20 touches, and I wouldn't be surprised. But certainly if any one of them did somehow get 20, 25 and they just fed him, I mean, it's a complete smash spot. I just don't think we can secure that. The next guy is going to be probably my most rostered running back. That's Devin Ford from Penn State. So Penn State had, unfortunately, Journey Brown's out for the season. We knew that. Noah Cain is now out for the season with his injury. And Ford's first week as kind of a primary starter, he only had 8 carries against Ohio State. But that game, Ohio State's got a nasty defense. That game was pretty ugly. Penn State was not able to play their normal game. And I think this week, though, is a completely different story against Maryland. Devin Ford is by default their lead running back. He's the most senior running back on the roster, listed as the starter. He definitely has long speed. I mean, last year in his first game ever as a college player, he had like a 75, 80-yard run for the touchdown. absolutely able to do that for this game. I'm going to have a ton of him at 5,900, no questions asked. And then let's see, we have Trayanum. I think it's Demontre Trayanum for Arizona State. He's 5,300. He's a hotshot rookie or, hotshot freshman, listed as the starter. I'm not sure what kind of volume we can expect. I think for a tournament, he's worthwhile in that game against USC, but, they're projected to be a dog. Arizona State is. I don't really know what to say about his pass catching ability. I mean, he's a true freshman. We haven't seen him on the field yet. Probably not going to have much of him, although he's interesting at 5,300 and a listed starter on a team with a pretty good offense. Mike Epstein from Illinois. He's the lead running back. He's only 4,600. And the reason he gets any kind of mention here is just because of the Minnesota defense. Although, especially if Taylor's playing their quarterback who may rush the ball a lot, I'm not sure that they probably are going to be losing the game. And I'm not sure I'm going to play a lot of them. I wanted to mention it, though. 4,600 for a lead running back against a terrible defense really isn't a bad idea. I just think we could do some other things, such as Bijan Robinson for Texas is 4,500. He's a 5-star elite running back prospect. Hasn't really done a whole lot yet this year, although he's been on the field. He has 7 receptions. I think he's run the ball a couple times. But here's the thing. Keontae Ingram is out for their game against West Virginia. Now, I wish the matchup was a little better. I'd love to see Bijan with no competition against Kansas or something like that. But against West Virginia, I think we can probably see about 15 touches, maybe 10 to 12 carries, and then 3 to 5 receptions, kind of in that Keontae Ingram role. He might be more explosive than Keontae Ingram. I mean, Ingram's a nice player, but Bijan has like next level jets and seriously interesting player. I mean, has a bright future ahead of him. There's a chance he takes the lead this week with the ability to start and goes totally crazy, never looks back. I don't love the matchup. I think I'll have some at 4,500 because it really opens up some other things you can do. Certainly worth mentioning. He has the door wide open for some opportunity this week. Roschon Johnson, I don't think he's like a big threat, to be honest, in the Texas backfield. Then we have Seth McGowan. We kind of talked about him, probably in line for mop-up duty in that game against Kansas, which he could get a touchdown. I mean, but I don't think you're going to get 100 yards. So even at 4,500, I mean, 60 and a touchdown doesn't do it for you. And then we have, again, Kevon Lee for 3,900. The Penn State running back. He's a true freshman and has been pushing for some playing time. And now with an additional running back out, he's good. I think he's a good prospect. I hate hoping for mop-up duty because even if they get all the fourth quarter, even at 3,900, I mean, I think there's enough other running back savings because I don't feel like this week you have to pay for like a huge running back like we did last week. So I'm not sure we need Kevon Lee, but certainly a name to keep in mind. And if you want to get crazy with it and, somehow hope that Devin Ford hasn't done a whole lot and they just like switch to Lee mid-game or something like that. But he's listed as a second stringer on the Penn State depth chart with Keziah Holmes, but I like Lee better as a prospect, so that's why I included him here. On to wide receivers. Jan Dotson, most expensive receiver on the board. He's 8,300 for Penn State. He's been their lead receiver and now gets Maryland. But again, I think I'd rather go look on the ground in Penn State. I think they'd prefer to be kind of a ground-based offense. And I don't think they're going to have to push the issue with Dotson. I'm not paying the most expensive receiver. I just don't think Clifford's a great quarterback, especially passing the ball. And they're not going to have to, force that. So I don't like that. Price tag, just considering we have some other options like Tylan Wallace, who was incredible last week, total slate saver for me. His price is bumped up to 7,900, but I do like the matchup decently well against Kansas State. Like I said, definitely not an imposing defense, and he's just a really good talent and the true alpha on his offense. So, I don't think the matchup has to be that perfect when you're talking about a guy who's going to push for 40+% of his team's passing production, which means they only need to pass for 250 yards for him to get to 100. And of course, he's going to be the touchdown magnet. So I like Tylan Wallace. in this slot for 7,900. Although certainly not a must play, I don't think, in that matchup against Kansas State. Dammy Brown, 7,700. I love him. I think the matchup versus Duke, it favors going through the air a little bit. And we didn't talk about their quarterback, Sam Howell. I just like some of the other values rather than Sam Howell, who has been a little bit of a disappointment this year, but he's still a good player. I think I like I said, some of the discounts you get on some of those other quarterbacks over the 8,100 price tag. I mean, I would rather play Slovis all day at 7,800 than 300 more for Sam Howell. So it's just a price thing. But De'Ami Brown, his receiver, is a true alpha this year for 7,700. He's a touchdown machine as well. He's a long ball specialist, so he doesn't even need that many receptions to go crazy. Although last week he did go crazy with 3 touchdowns. Then we move down in price pretty significantly to Rashad Bateman, who's 7,000. And this reminds me a little bit of Tylan Wallace last week, who was 7,100 and then went for 44 DraftKings points. Just because Bateman is an elite talent, similar to Tylan Wallace, he is, coming off a couple of weak games. The offense is a little clunky, just like the Oklahoma State offense had been. But this is an absolutely perfect spot against Illinois. And definitely will have a lot of Bateman at 7,000. I just think he's way underpriced for the type of guy he is. I mean, in the right matchup, if they try to open it up, I mean, he could be 10-catch guy for sure in this matchup against Illinois. If they can't just smash on the ground, I think this passing offense has a real opportunity to go crazy this week. So I'll definitely have some Rashad Bateman. Then we have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughns, both from USC. I have no problem stacking both of them with Slovis, or pick one and pair him with Slovis. St. Brown, high NFL draft pick, maybe not round 1, but I bet you round 2. Really good player. And then Tyler Vaughns is a nice secondary player, almost had 1,000 yards last year for a little discount at 5,700 if you need that. But I love that passing game this week. Then we have Tay Barber, who plays for TCU. He's their leading receiver. And like I said, I just really like the matchup. Pairing him with Dugan's a nice play. At 5,500, he's not too pricey. Then we have Karius Jackson, Georgia receiver. He's been their number 1 receiver actually this year, honestly, even more than Pickens. And Pickens is questionable. I kind of think he's going to push the play, of course, against Florida. But Florida's defense is much more susceptible through the air than on the ground. And Jackson's been really good. I just, 5,400 is not cheap enough to really want to put a lot of investment into Stetson Bennett. I think the Gator defense isn't great, but I also don't think it's not bad enough to where these teams are just going to completely walk all over them. I think this game could be tight. Georgia's defense is certainly incredible. Florida may have some trouble. I think it's not just going to be a wide open game. I wanted to list Jackson because I do think he's a little bit of a value, but probably won't have too much of him. And I would really only have him as a one-off, I think, not necessarily paired with his quarterback. Speaking of pairing with a quarterback, Winston Wright for West Virginia. I love putting him with Doege. He's 5,100. He's definitely their lead receiver. And like I said, I like that matchup with Texas through the air. Then we have Ottman Bell for $5,000. He is Minnesota's kind of wide receiver. Well, he is their wide receiver too, behind Bateman. But I really like that $5,000 price tag in a game that I'm just banking on that passing offense getting going. I wouldn't even hate going Ottman Bell and Bateman paired with Morgan, their quarterback. But certainly you could go Morgan, Ottman Bell as a kind of a different owned stack there. Pat Freiermuth for Penn State. This is definitely a matchup thing. He's 4,700. He was their second leading receiver last year behind KJ Hamler. He should be a touchdown machine. He's been very productive his entire career, kind of off to a slow start. But, Maryland's coming to town can really free that up. I think at 4,700, he's an interesting value there, especially if you're looking to stack that Penn State game. Brian Hightower from Illinois. So, coming into the year, it was supposed to be a guy we'll talk about, Josh Imatorbhebhe. as the lead receiver. He was Illinois' top receiver last year, transfer from USC, but now they have a transfer from Miami, Florida, this Brian Hightower kid, 6'3", 220, and he's coming on here as a go-to guy for Illinois. Almost had 100 yards last week at 4,600 in this game, in this matchup. I really like him. I think he might be more sneaky than his counterpart, Amato Bebe, who's 4,200, but I really like either play. Honestly, pick one and go with it as a one-off for Illinois receivers. I like that play a lot. Definitely will have a lot of those guys. Then we have Austin Stogner from Oklahoma. This is really just a matchup in that offense getting going versus Kansas. But he's 4,600 right there with Hightower. And I think I'd rather Hightower just because, Stogner's a tight end. I don't think he's going to get to 100 yards. You'd be just hoping for like a touchdown and, 60 to 70 yards. Oklahoma's spreading it out a ton, which is why I don't even have any Sooners really listed. Because they have like 5 guys within 5 receptions of each other. So Rattler, Parker Washington for Penn State. Again, Penn State is a big theme here this week. He's 4,100. He is a starting true freshman for Penn State. Like him in a Penn State stack, pair him with Clifford as a cheaper option off of Dotson, their lead receiver. He'll be a little overlooked. I think most people will say, ooh, Dotson, and he may have a decent game, but I'd rather pay 4,100 for Parker Washington. Then we have Daz Newsome for UNC. I like this, like I said, the matchup against Duke, it favors getting some production through the air. And he, Bo Corrales is out, which makes that passing tree a little bit thinner. And was their leading receiver last year and really hasn't been quite as good this year, but certainly for $4,000, I like that. We also have Caffrey Brown. He's 3,800 at UNC as well. So the exact same idea. He's just even a little bit cheaper, kind of the third receiver, but big play guy and, certainly worth a shot, I think, especially in like a tournament or something like that to strike gold. Then we have Quentin Johnston for TCU. So while Barber is kind of their, reception leader, Quentin Johnson, certainly their big play guy. He's got about as many yards as Barber on a lot fewer catches, but he is certainly a big play waiting to happen. He's a true freshman, total stud, I think has a bright future ahead, but only 4,000 now because he's only getting, 2 or 3 receptions a game. But again, I like the matchup. I like the point total, and I certainly like pairing him with Dugan and hoping, obviously, he goes off. You're going to need a little bit of help there, especially in a tournament. And we're always looking to get a little lucky in a tournament. So now I wanted to just go over, we'll do 2 lineups I've already put together, see how all these guys fit. And these are going to be tournament lineups I've thrown together. Really, I just picked, honestly, the best, narrow it down to kind of a menu of players I really like, and then just see how they all fit best together and mix and match them and do, a bunch of tournaments that way. Then I kind of pick my favorites and I'll do some cash games to hedge those tournaments is kind of my strategy. Really hoping for the big hit in a tournament. So first one, we're going to go cheapy quarterbacks. So West Virginia's Dogie and then Max Dugan. So these are both under $7,000 quarterbacks. We're going to pair Barber with Dugan, and we're going to pair Wright with Doogie. I guess it's Dougie. Sorry. And so those are going to be our 2 quarterback receiver pairings. And then we're going to go Devin Ford, of course. He's going to be in like every single lineup. Chuba Hubbard at running back. Tylan Wallace is Oklahoma State. And then the other flex option is Trey Ingham, which I talked about. That's definitely a tournament play, and I may even flip that out. That may need some tweaking because I'm not sure I'm in love with playing him. He's certainly exciting as a true freshman, starter, but I may back off there. Anyway, and then we have another lineup that I've already put together here. This is going kind of more expensive quarterbacks, and what can you do if you go that route? We've got Clifford for Penn State and pairing him with Parker Washington. We've got Keaton Slovis, my guy, pairing with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So those are our two quarterback receiver combos. And then Wesley Wright, I'm going to have a ton of him. Just his price tag's good. I really like that offense. So even not paired with his quarterback, but just as a one-off. We've got Chris Ottman-Bell from Minnesota. So he fits at 5,000. And then we've got Devin Ford and Stevenson as my running backs. Like I said, Devin Ford's going to be all over my lineups. But Stevenson is a perfect tournament lineup, I think. I mean, the guy could have 3 touchdowns again. I think he's going to get 1 probably. But yeah, you want him to go off completely, obviously, to win a tournament. 6,900 is a decent bet to have probably 2 touchdowns. But like I said, that backfield's kind of hairy. So I'm not going to have a ton of that. But that's a guy who fits in there, for an example of a tournament lineup. We are going to continue to tweak, but those are the big names that I really like. And follow me on Twitter. It's at AL_FF_RED. I'll be putting out stuff I think through as I go into Saturday, even up to Saturday morning, even up to kickoff at noon. If I can find any information or I see anything, I will tweet it out. So follow me up to kickoff. And hopefully we can have another good week. We're back-to-back really strong weeks. College football is really as fun as NFL. I think part of why I want to do this is get, DraftKings in college on Saturdays to be as highly followed and used as Sundays. I mean, what are we doing on Saturday? Let's throw in some lineups, and why wait till Sunday? So until next week, this is Alfred signing off.